most important thing about Thomas Robbins is that he is the one person that has left us a record of this style of Rococo garden. Probably without him, we wouldn't have known that it was going on in the middle of the 18th century. He's fun, gets to know lots of interesting people, not from the most prestigious background himself. His parents owned a malt house in Charlton Kings, which was a distinct town at the time, but now really a suburb of Cheltenham. He got to know a Huguenot called Jacob Portrait, who lived in Charlton Kings, and he was a fan painter. And Robbins is recorded as his servant, or it could have been as an apprentice. Whatever, he must have learnt some quite important skills with Portrait. And he always maintains this very delicate, minute, miniature way of painting. He tends to use watercolour on vellum, which is akin to miniature painting and fan painting. The thing about Thomas Robbins's paintings is they are actually quite small, but they're incredibly detailed. So he pays attention to everything, almost every brick in the architecture, and then every plant in the garden. But he'll also then sprinkle in these little vignettes of people and animals and dogs. So you could spend days looking at his paintings and still see different things. And I mean, I still find different things, people walking off into the wilderness of the garden right in the background. He picks on Bath as his main place, and he goes there for the season, which was the fashionable season when people visited from across the world, actually. And he had his fans to sell, and he also had engravings to sell. And then he picked up patrons who would then bring him to their estates in the summer months and paint them. He knows that people going into these hot ballrooms, they're going to need a fan. The ladies will need a fan, and they'll like a little memento, a souvenir of their time in Cheltenham. And there's some lovely little vignettes of the places that they will want to go when they're in Cheltenham. But he also includes directions to find the nearest toilet. And that's just wonderful. It's beautiful, it's a souvenir, and it's useful. He really embraced nature. There's a poem that's published after he died in the Bath Chronicle, which calls him nature's favourite child. He's very distinctive. He's got a very clear style. I can spot a Thomas Robbins from a good few miles away. And he mixed with the owners. Most artists that would come in, they'd be treated like a tradesperson, but he's in the paintings. He puts himself in the paintings, so he knew those people. Well, it's sort of in those early pictures, he's quite suave, he's quite slim and elegant, and then like the rest of us, he goes to pasture. And then you can recognise him because he's kind of quite rotund, and he has a nice big red nose, and he's sort of rolling around in the foreground with the lady of the house. In the 18th century, there's no cameras or phones. How else do you record the wonderful things that you've done in your garden and in your house if you don't have an artist? He's got this bird's eye view, which everyone thinks is a bit odd, but actually that's what was going on. That's how people captured the whole of an estate. So it's similar to a map, but detailed, 3D. Must have been incredibly difficult to do. They don't have aeroplanes or drone. They can't send a drone up to do it. But that's how they had to have that kind of perspective. If you take your kind of 21st century eyes, and just sort of adjust and just think about what he's showing you, you can see that it's all relative, it's all in proportion. And the accuracy is amazing, to the point that you can reconstruct a garden, which is what was done at Painswick. But without him, we really would have no idea about this fashion for what we've now termed, art historians have termed, the Rococo Garden. So Hyett gets Robbins to record Painswick and his property in Gloucester, and then a few individual buildings in Painswick Rococo Gardens, and then also Pan's Lodge, which was in the woodland across the valley in Painswick, which was the sort of the summer party house where he would ride up and take his friends. And there's a good 10, 15 years between those commissions. And John Harris, who is an amazing architectural and garden historian, worked it all out in the 1970s and brought Thomas Robbins back to everybody. And on the back of that, John and a few others, including Timothy Mole, convinced Lord and Lady Dickinson that they could recreate Hyett's garden here at Painswick. And the only evidence was Thomas Robbins' painting and a few sketches, because the garden had been taken over. They were using it as a Christmas tree farm. So, there was very little evidence on the ground. And the whole of Painswick Rococo Garden was recreated just using Thomas Robbins' painting. So Painswick Rococo Garden is a really significant example of our heritage. It's the only example of a Rococo garden that still exists, and we wouldn't really understand how they were sharing ideas and experimenting with planting and horticulture. And so at Painswick we actually can see what he was doing, and it's preserving and making available to the public that moment, that small time in the middle of the 18th century. And it's a real testament of our heritage and our ability to now understand and preserve and cherish that heritage.